welcome to another Fragments of Silicon review session. Four games up this week, which means you might think this to be a longer review session than normal, but that usually means we got games like Ramify up to review. That is to say, this game is a really short, well, not so much short, but it's a simple puzzle game. Like, Ramify is not the kind of game that I'm going to be spending 15 minutes describing or analyzing. It doesn't have that kind of depth. That's not a bad thing. It's just an objective thing, mind you. But yeah, Ramify here is I'm not exactly like, it's a logic puzzle game. Yes, I think that fits the descriptor best, because your goal to completing the puzzles is, I know you're dealing with basically marshmallows here. Like,
I thought they were chiclets.
Could be. Like, they're some undescribed box or rectangle. I guess technically square, but all squares are rectangles. But anyway, the basic goal of each puzzle is to inflate these, once again, squares. Like I said, these things don't have a definition. They can be really anything you want, as long as it's quadrilateral. Anyway, your job is to inflate these squares and make sure they all disappear in the requisite amount of moves. It's like, make them all disappear in like 7 turns, 12 turns, 24 turns. The number will depend on the level, and it's not like, and also this game doesn't have like, all the upper tier puzzles are, do everything in 7 moves, or, the limited amount of moves. That's actually dispersed throughout the game, or at least from what I saw. I'll admit I only got about to the mid 30s here, because I got stuck on a puzzle, and, I do what I usually do when I get stuck on a puzzle in a puzzle game for too long. I lose interest and move on to something else. As far as how well that'll affect the review, not too much. Like, I'll admit I didn't see every stage gimmick. Like, around level 20, they start throwing in the first, what this game interprets as a curveball. That is to say, that these little cloud puffs that will just block a pellet. Right, that's the other part I didn't mention. It's like when you pop one of these squares, it'll send projectiles in the 4 cardinal directions, and those will in turn inflate or break more of these puff squares. And that is basically where the logic comes into. You got to figure out which blocks to break in what order, in order to make sure you finish in the requisite amount of moves. Some of these are easier than others. Like, I actually found it a bit odd that the difficulty spike would actually be all over the place. Like, there were a few puzzles I got stuck on, and then the next puzzle over would be, I just did that in like 30 seconds. Really, the escalation, the learning curve, whatever you want to call that, isn't necessarily in difficulty. It's in not just stage gimmicks. Like, the other one I've seen is the arrows, which I presume, when a bullet goes on that arrow, it will go in that direction regardless of where it came from. But the other way this thing escalates is in size. Like, I have seen pictures of like puzzles from the 90s, and they are, very, very large in comparison to what came before. That's some very typical puzzle escalation. Nothing wrong with it, but I think that it speaks to the core ethos of this game, and that is minimalist and utilitarian. You know, that is this game probably to a fault. You know, because the objects that you're dealing with are all uniform white squares. The backgrounds are just random colored gradients. Yeah, this game is not much to look at, not much to listen to. It's it's another one of those games where it's this is minimalism, the art style, an exemplar. The music is fairly relaxing, and that's that's the goal the game is going for. It's going for a soothing vibe, and it's like I'd say it mostly succeeds at that. It's a bit subjective because it depends on how your mood for getting stuck in a place, for example, will affect things. Like if you're doing the same puzzle for the 50th time, you're not going to be as relaxed. But that's just an endemic issue with having actual difficulty. Let's see, and that's really about it as far as content goes. Really, the only thing to mention is the amount of levels. You do get a lot of bang for your buck because this game does pack in about 123 levels. Right. Yeah, that's a bit odd for a level count, but it's not something that you'd reach in a setting. I think that's the important thing there. And let me see, pricing. The game will clock in regular pricing at $3. And yeah, that's a really good price for this kind of game. And overall, if I had to rate it, slightly above average. It's like I think the price there is really helping things. Otherwise, this is a decent enough game, but it's it's the kind of game I'd want on a touch device, a mobile phone, maybe the Nintendo Switch, something to play. We've talked about this before, but this would be a really good game to whip out at the bus station for 5 minutes or so. It doesn't take very long to get through a round. Even the bigger rounds can be completed depending on the gimmick. Anyway, and yeah, that's about all I got for Ramify here. Like I said, this is usually when we have like 3 or 4, really 4 games stacked end to end. We got the simple and the easy to cover in some of the slots. Anyway, so that'll do it for Ramify. Coming up after the break, Galax will be reviewing Legend of the Skyfish.